Imagine a place where doors are routinely left unlocked, where the crisp autumn air smells of pine and wood smoke, a place where you feel entirely safe. But safety, my friends, is an illusion. In the northern panhandle of Idaho, there is a landscape that feels like it belongs to another world, the Palouse. It's a geographical region of rolling silt dunes frozen in a permanent wave. In the summer, it's golden wheat. In November, it is a stark gray void stretching from northern Idaho and southern eastern Washington. Tucked away in the Palouse is Moscow, Idaho, a place where people go to find themselves. It's a university town, small enough to feel like home but large enough to get lost in. But on November 13th, 2022, a shadow crept through the small town of Moscow. A shadow that would enter a lively off-campus house on King Road and commit an act of such staggering, cold-blooded brutality that it would paralyze an entire nation with fear. I'm Audrina, and this is True Crime on the Brain. This case involves deeply disturbing themes, including home invasion, prolonged stalking, and graphic descriptions of a multiple homicide. We also discuss the severe psychological trauma and survivor's guilt experienced by the roommates who lived through that night. Listener discretion is advised. Today we are doing more than just retelling the news. We are going into the autopsy of a community, the digital footprint of a predator, and the unsealed 2026 reports that finally tell us what happened in the rooms police called the most horrific scene they had ever witnessed. We're talking about the Idaho murders. Today's case was requested by Alexa, who had this case rattling inside her brain since it first happened. So today, this one's for you, Alexa. Today we are traveling to a sleepy town in northern Idaho. To understand the horror of that night, we must first understand the light that was extinguished. The 3-story, 6-bedroom house at 1122 King Road was a staple of the University of Idaho Greek life scene. It was always buzzing with energy. It was a happy home filled with laughter, shared clothes, and the chaotic joy of college youth. Madison Mogan was 21 years old. Maddie was a senior, a marketing major, known for her radiant smile, her love of life, and her deeply nurturing spirit. She worked at a local restaurant called the Mad Greek and was adored by everyone who met her. Her inseparable best friend was Kaylee Gonzalez, also 21. They were a singular unit. Since 6th grade, if you saw Maddie, you saw Kaylee, and vice versa. Kaylee has been described as a fierce, ambitious, and deeply loyal person. She was just about to graduate, looking forward to a tech job in Austin, Texas, and a future of endless possibilities. Some described her as a firecracker, just bursting with life and wanted to live it to the fullest. Down on the 2nd floor lived Xana Kernodle, 20. Xana was a junior majoring in marketing. She was vibrant, fiercely independent, and endlessly positive. Friends say Xana didn't just walk into a room. She transformed it. She also worked at Mad Greek with Maddie and was deeply in love with her longtime boyfriend, Ethan. During her fight for her life, she left behind crucial evidence that would help police lock away the monster that shattered their home. And on the night of November 12th, Xana's boyfriend, 20-year-old Ethan Chapin, was staying over. Ethan was a freshman, a triplet whose brother and sister also attended the university. He was a handsome sports enthusiast with a booming laugh and a heart as big as his stature. Some people even referred to him as a gentle giant. Madison Mogan, age 21, Kaylee Gonzalez, age 21, Xana Kernodle, age 20, Ethan Chapin, age 20. These 4 lives represented the best of what it means to be young and full of promise. They were planning careers, trips, and futures, and someone was watching all of it. This is what we know of the fateful timeline from November 12th to 13th of 2022. From 10 o'clock p.m. to 1:30 a.m., Maddie and Kaylee are at the Corner Club bar. From 11 o'clock p.m. to 1:45 a.m., Xana and Ethan are at the Sigma Chi fraternity house. At 1:40 a.m., Maddie and Kaylee order food at the Grub Truck. 1:56 a.m., Maddie and Kaylee take a private ride home. 2 o'clock a.m., all 4 students are back inside 1122 King Road. 4 o'clock a.m., Xana receives a DoorDash food delivery order. 4:04 to 4:20 a.m., the killer enters, attacks, and then flees. Now let's walk through the timeline of that fateful Saturday night and the early hours of Sunday, November 13th. It's an ordinary evening. Maddie and Kaylee go out to a local bar called the Corner Club and are later seen chatting and laughing at a late-night food truck called the Grub Truck. Xana and Ethan are attending a party at the nearby Sigma Chi fraternity house. By 2:00 a.m., all four have returned to 1122 King Road. Two other surviving roommates who are sleeping on the bottom floor are also home. By all accounts, the house settles down and the lights flick off. But outside, a white sedan, a Hyundai Elantra, is circling the neighborhood. It passes the house once, twice, 3 times. It's searching, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability. At 4:00 a.m., Xana receives a DoorDash food delivery. She is awake, just scrolling on TikTok. The house is quiet but not entirely asleep. At 4:04 a.m., the white car arrives for a 4th time and parks. What followed in the next 20 minutes is the stuff of absolute nightmares. Between 4:04 a.m. and 4:20 a.m., the killer entered through the second-floor sliding door, which was on the ground level. The first floor was the basement, referred to as the first floor of the 6-bedroom home. Armed with a heavy K-bar knife, a knife with a 7-inch clip-point blade and leather washer handle, he moves through the dark hallways like a specter. Up on the 3rd floor, Maddie and Kaylee are asleep in the same bed. The killer slips into the room. Autopsy reports later revealed the sheer savagery. The victims were caught completely off guard, stabbed brutally in their bed. The killer then moves down to the 2nd floor. Xana is awake. We know from forensic data that she fights back fiercely. Her hands bear deep defensive wounds. Ethan is attacked in the room with her. The terror in those rooms, in those quiet morning hours, is unimaginable. By 4:20 a.m., the white Elantra is seen on security cameras speeding away from the King Road house. Behind it, a house of silence, a house of blood. Now let's get into the injuries. This is going to be the hardest part to hear. The 2026 unsealed autopsy summaries indicate a level of overkill rarely seen. Madison's fatal injuries were left lung laceration and liver laceration. She was asleep when her and Kaylee were attacked first. Awoken by the intruder, Kaylee fought long and hard. She had over 20 stab wounds, asphyxia injuries, and blunt force injuries. She fought as hard as she could. Next was Ethan. Ethan was found in the doorway. His injuries were swift and fatal. He was found in the doorway to the bedroom. His fatal injury was a severed subclavian artery, an artery located in the upper chest directly underneath the collarbones. His jugular vein was also severed. Xana Kernodle fought the hardest. She suffered 67 stab wounds, mostly defensive. Defensive wounds on her hands were so severe they were classified as near total incapacitation. She tried to grab the blade. She tried to live. For months, the public wondered, how did 2 people survive in that house? What did they see? What did they do? When police documents and later court texts were finally released, a deeply unsettling, chaotic picture emerged of what the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, experienced in the dead of night. Dylan's room was on the 2nd floor, right down the hall from Xana. Bethany's room was on the lower 1st floor in the basement. Around 4:00 a.m., Dylan was awakened by what she thought sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog upstairs. A short time later, she thought she heard someone say, "There's someone here." She peeked out of her bedroom, but saw nothing. She opened her door a second time when she heard what sounded like crying coming from Xana's room and a male voice saying, "It's okay. I'm going to help you." Terrified and deeply confused, Dylan began texting Bethany downstairs. Dylan texted Bethany, "I'm really confused." Then Dylan texted Kaylee, "Kaylee, what's going on?" No response. Dylan opened her door a 3rd time. This time, her eyes pierced the darkness of the 2nd floor hallway. Walking toward her was a figure dressed in black clothing and a mask that covered his mouth and nose. He was tall, athletic, with one very distinct feature: bushy eyebrows. The figure walked right past Dylan as she stood in a state of what she called frozen shock. He did not look at her, He did not touch her. He simply walked past her and exited out the sliding glass door that he used to enter the home. Panicked, Dylan ran down the stairs to the first floor to find Bethany. Dylan texted her, like a ski mask almost, and that he had something over his head and mouth. "I'm not kidding. I am so freaked out." Bethany texts her back, "Come to my room. Run down here." Dylan burst into Bethany's room. But here is where the tragic fog of that night thickens. Both girls were young, intoxicated, and completely unable to comprehend the sheer scale of the horror that had just occurred. They didn't think that a mass murder had taken place. They thought a creepy intruder or an aggressive partygoer had wandered through. Dylan even caught a glimpse of Xana on the floor on her way down, but assumed she was passed out from drinking. This is something that has become a red flag in many people's minds that have heard about the case. Xana was laying on the floor covered in blood and wounds. How could she have thought that she just passed out from drinking? During times of trauma, the brain actually works to protect itself from what it is actually seeing. It's a result of shock called cognitive normalization as a form of dissociation. The brain tries to normalize anomalies to maintain a sense of safety. Clinging to each other in fear, Dylan and Bethany locked themselves inside Bethany's first floor bedroom. And there, in the dark, they waited for hours, completely unaware that a slaughterhouse lay just above their heads. The next morning, the sun rose over Moscow, but the house on King Road remained silent. Bethany woke up around 7 a.m. with a terrible toothache. She called her dad, who was a dentist, and told her to take some Advil and go back to sleep. So she did, still completely and entirely oblivious. By 11:30 a.m., Dylan and Bethany woke up again. They tried texting and calling their roommates upstairs to talk about the terrifying man from the night before. They received no response. Freaking out, they didn't immediately call 911. Instead, they called over a few close friends, including some fraternity brothers, to help them check out the house. When the friends arrived, they went up to the second floor. One of the friends looked into Xana's room, checked for a pulse on Ethan and Xana, but found nothing. Then, chaos erupted. The friend yelled for everyone to get out of the house. At 11:52 a.m., a frantic 911 call was placed from Bethany's phone. The survivors were so hysterical that friends had to take the phone. They told the dispatcher that they had found one of their roommates unconscious, initially believing she had just gotten alcohol poisoning or passed out. Only when the police arrived did the veil lift, revealing the grim, blood-soaked reality. For nearly 6 weeks, the trail was freezing cold. The town of Moscow was gripped by a suffocating paranoia. Was the killer a classmate? A neighbor? A local stalking in the shadows? Enrollment dipped and students fled the campus in horror. But behind the scenes, a meticulous digital dragnet was closing in, and it led investigators across state lines to a man who studied the very mechanics of murder. Enter Bryan Kohberger. At the time, Kohberger was a 28-year-old Ph.D. student studying criminology at Washington State University, just a short 15-minute drive across the state line in Pullman, Washington. Just think of the irony. A man dedicating his life to understanding the criminal mind, testing his theories in the most horrific way possible. Kohberger was described by acquaintances as highly intelligent but socially awkward, rigid, and intensely observant. Police reports and cell tower data unsealed in 2025 and 2026 show a terrifying pattern. Between June 2022 and the night of the murders, Kohberger's phone pinged the tower serving 1122 King Road at least 12 times. Most of these visits were late at night or in the early morning hours. He wasn't just passing by. He was studying the rhythms of the house. He knew when the lights went out. He knew the sliding glass door was a weakness. He was stalking them from the shadows of night. It is reported that Bryan had been monitoring police communications of the Pullman Police Department at 12:26 a.m. on an app called Broadcastify, before turning his phone off around 2:45 a.m., about 2 hours before the crime. So how did they catch him? It was a masterclass in modern forensics. Let's start with the car. Police combed through thousands of hours of local surveillance video, tracking that white Hyundai Elantra from Pullman to Moscow and back on the night of the murders. Next was the cell tower data. Investigators discovered his phone had pinged near the King Road home at least 12 times in the months leading up to the murders. He had been stalking them. On the night of the murders, his phone conveniently went dark right before the killings and turned back on right after. Next, we have the knife sheath. When the killer murdered Maddie and Kaylee, he made a fatal error. He left behind a leather knife sheath on Maddie's bed. On the metal snap of that sheath, investigators found a single microscopic trace of male DNA. In late December, law enforcement tracked Kohberger as he drove across the country with his father to his family home in Pennsylvania. Police raided the house, sifted through the family's trash, and matched the DNA to Kohberger's father, proving with 99.9% certainty that the DNA on the knife sheath belonged to Bryan Kohberger. On December 30th, 2022, the SWAT team broke down the door of his family home in the Poconos in Pennsylvania and arrested him. For more than 2 years, the legal system ground along. The trial was delayed, moved over 300 miles away to Boise due to intense pretrial publicity, and the public braced itself for a grueling, graphic court battle. Kohberger's legal team first tried to get the death penalty removed by stating that Bryan's diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder should disqualify him from facing capital punishment. The motion was denied. Kohberger's defense team then prepared to argue that the DNA on the sheath had been planted. But in July of 2025, just weeks before the trial was set to begin, Kohberger did something few expected. To avoid the death penalty, which in Idaho could mean execution by firing squad, he accepted a plea deal. On July 2, 2025, he stood in front of a judge and pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. 3 weeks later, he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years. At the sentencing hearing, Dylan and Bethany finally broke their silence. They faced the court, weeping as they read their victim impact statements. Bethany spoke of the debilitating guilt she carried for not knowing what had happened sooner, and how she spent a year sleeping in her parents' room with the doors double locked. She also fired back at the internet sleuths and trolls who had harassed her and Dylan for years, sending them death threats because they hadn't called 911 immediately. During Bethany's statement, she said, "I thought we were going to wake up and go upstairs, see them and tell them how they had scared us. I hope they are remembered for who they are, not what happened to them." The plea deal fractured the victims' families. The Chapin and Mogan families expressed relief, grateful to bypass the trauma of a graphic trial. But the Gonzalez family was furious. They argued the state failed them by letting Kohberger escape the death penalty without forcing him to give a full confession. Because of that, questions still haunt the true crime community, keeping us awake at night. What was the connection? Did Kohberger know the victims? Did he follow them on social media, or did he spot them at the Mad Greek restaurant where Maddie and Xana worked? Police records released after his sentencing revealed strange digital footprints, but a direct, personal link has never been publicly confirmed. Where's the murder weapon? The K-bar knife has never been found. Where did he dump it? Is it buried deep in the Idaho wilderness or resting at the bottom of a freezing river? And why did he spare Dylan? Why did Kohberger walk right past Dylan in the hallway? Did his mask obscure his peripheral vision? Was he exhausted from the frantic struggle with Xana? Or was his bloodlust simply sated? Perhaps the most haunting question of all is what was going through Bryan Kohberger's brain. Did his studies in criminology fuel a dark compulsion to commit the perfect crime? Or did he simply want to feel the ultimate power over life and death? We may never know. Bryan Kohberger will take those secrets to his grave, locked away in a concrete cell. But for the families of Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, and for the roommates who survived that night, the sentence offers a cold comfort. The monster is caged, but the ghosts of King Road, they still linger. Today in 2026, the house is dust. It was demolished to prevent true crime tourism, but the legal battles are just beginning. The families have filed a massive lawsuit against Washington State University. They claim the school ignored red flags, that Kohberger was fired from his teaching assistant position just days before the murders for behavioral issues and creepy interactions with female students. The lawsuit asks, if the university had acted, would Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee still be here? The house at 1122 King Road was demolished in late 2023. It is now a vacant lot. But the why remains a void. Was it a sick academic experiment? A localized obsession? We are left with the memories of 4 students who were much more than the 150 wounds that claimed them. Thanks for joining me as I dive into a case that has been rattling inside Alexa's brain. If you have a case that you would like to know more about or have covered, drop a comment or head over to our Instagram at True Crime on the Brain to drop a suggestion. Remember to stay sane with True Crime on the Brain. I'll catch you next Friday with a new episode.